Next, we can look at our third example. Again, this is a slightly up-tempo rock-pop example, and so let's have a listen. To my ears, this is the kind of song that needs more staccato playing rather than legato lines, such as those we created in our previous example. To do this, I will use the Orchestral Essentials 2 library, as this has some rather interesting sounds that will help us here. If we look at this spiccato violins patch, by playing softly, we have the spiccato instrument. But by playing at a higher velocity, we have a half-note down instrument. We also have the possibility to use the modulation wheel to adjust the length of these articulations. So, by increasing the modulation wheel, the spiccato lasts longer, and likewise we can adjust the length of the half-note down instrument. So this is a nice instrument to use in our arrangement here. The fact that we can control the length of the notes and the style of articulation means that we can bring life to our arrangement. Any additional movement that we can bring to an arrangement is a good thing, be it using articulation like this, or, for example, by adjusting the filter on a synthesizer patch. So now let's record this idea. The sound certainly comes through. It's very direct. If we compare it to our other strings in the Cine sample library, we can hear that these are much drier and more upfront. Of course, there is personal taste to be taken into consideration when making these choices. The important thing is to make a choice. Endlessly looking through your libraries and trying every possibility will ultimately take up a lot of time. If you know your libraries and have personal favorites for specific situations, then this can be a great time saver. And of course, there will be specialist libraries or high-end libraries that will give you better individual samples. But once again, this depends on budget and availability. The important thing is to create an idea that sounds realistic. On our editor page, we can see that the fourth part of each section has a small error. In these fourth sections, they remain constant on the A flat note rather than dropping down like I did. So I'll simply edit these to be correct. This is something I didn't notice when playing it in. We also have a section where we are playing octaves, and at the same time the rhythmic side has been changed slightly. To help this instrument fit into the mix slightly better, I'll go to the control panel and increase the reverb level. As described in the previous chapters, this instrument is working in an ostinato fashion. It's a repetitive pattern, the kind of which is used commonly in pop and rock music. Now, the timing of this pattern is not 100% correct, if we were to compare it to a quantized track, for example. But the interesting thing is that if you have an orchestra with many players, each of those individual musicians will be playing slightly differently to the other musicians. And this creates the power and the richness of an orchestra. We don't want to lose this, so it's important to balance accuracy with musicality and richness. So please don't automatically quantize, even in a pop or rock setting. The motion and movement around the beat is what gives a piece of music its richness and character. Of course, if a style of music requires absolute accuracy, which can be the case in more dance genres like techno, then quantizing may be exactly what is required. And of course, then you could activate quantizing when playing the strings in to avoid having an extra step of quantizing afterwards. One other option we have is to combine the two libraries, so we can copy the pattern we have played onto our Cine Samples Light track. And now, if we listen, there's a certain richness to the sound which a single track does not achieve. The fact that the Cine Samples Light library is somewhat slower in its attack actually enhances the combination of the two libraries. So when we listen with the backing track, in my opinion, it certainly sounds better and is definitely worth considering. The best thing to do in this situation would be to actually record the pattern again for each library that you add. This will add another layer of detail, and once again, all the small details can add up to your arrangement sounding much more interesting and realistic. But we don't have to stop here. We can also consider adding another instrument line, and to try this, I will switch to the Cine Samples Light legato instrument. So let's try something. At some point whilst recording, I had to use both hands, which creates the issue of me not being able to use the modulation wheel. If we look in the editor towards the end, we can see where there is a flat line in the modulation wheel data, and this is because I was not controlling it anymore. The issue I have is that these notes should be somewhat more noticeable, and in order to do this, I will actually erase them and go to an identical but new track. Which will allow me to control the dynamics of these notes independently from the others. So I record over that section. Having listened back, it's clear that they are much more noticeable and certainly add to the arrangement. I can also adjust the modulation wheel data manually to control the dynamics. And then we come to a section where the instrument drops out, and this creates a wonderful open feeling from which we can build again if we wish to. So I'll add something after this drop. And as you can hear, the strings are becoming more and more powerful, and almost dominating the song. This, however, is very often what people want in this type of song. It creates an almost euphoric feeling at the end of an arrangement, and becomes very orchestral. So in this example, we can see that you can combine staccato and legato within the same piece of music, unlike in our previous examples where we used each style individually. Now we can move on to our next example.